Biology with Mrs. Miller at BVISD. We have been studying genetics and heredity. So now we're going to move on to the inheritance of human traits. We want to be able to identify codominance, multiple allelic, sex-linked, and polygenic patterns of human inheritance. And we want to distinguish among the conditions that result from extra autosomal or sex chromosomes. So here is a picture of a multi-generational family. Grandpa and grandchildren, grandma and grandchildren, and daughter, and then great-grandparents, all the way down to great-grandchild. And so we can see some, if you study closely, you're going to be able to see some traits that are passed on even down into the great-grandchild. So we want to figure out how these traits are passed and what other kind of things may have been passed down. So let's talk about what happens when we have codominance in humans. Now, one of these codominance issues is the sickle cell anemia. Now, this is most common found in people of African American descent or Caucasians of Mediterranean descent. Now, in the homozygous population, the oxygen-carrying protein of the hemoglobin differs by one single amino acid from a regular hemoglobin. Now, when this happens, the structure actually forms a crescent-shaped or a moon-shaped red blood cell. This is a problem simply because that shape does not allow the oxygen to be released into the capillaries properly, and it actually blocks the blood vessels. So if you actually have two parents that are homozygous for sickle cell anemia, they are going to have one child basically that's going to have the disease, one that's going to be fine, and then two that are going to be carriers of this disease. So another type of thing is blood typing. Now, I used to do this a lot when I worked in the hospital, and blood typing is determined by gene 1. And gene 1 has 3 different alleles. It's called A, B, and then little I. Now, in the early 1900s, scientists had identified 4 blood types, A, B, and A, B, B, and O. Now, all of these are based on the presence of certain proteins that we are called antigens in the blood. And so within that blood typing system, the ABO system, the doctors can actually figure out critical information that can help perform medical procedures. And this is required in blood transfusions and donations with mothers having babies and all kinds of other situations, including surgeries. Now, you have to actually match blood types of patients and donors. And at one point, that's all we did was match the ABO type. But certain things could go wrong there. Now, after a certain amount of time, scientists realized that they could predict the blood type of a child based on his or her parents' blood types. And that's originally how we began to determine parentage. Now, if one of the parents' blood types were unknown, the scientists could also use the blood type of the children to identify that missing parent's blood type. So in this way, that's the way we would determine paternity and maternity of a child. Now we have more complex ways of doing it, but we still sometimes use blood typing. We know that if a child has A blood and the mother has type AB blood, the biological fathers could have any of the 4 types of blood. So this means that the blood typing alone, we couldn't exactly eliminate or include any person as a father. So in the end, the power of exclusion is only about 30%. So blood typing isn't as useful, and we're going to learn on about gel electrophoresis in the next chapter that will. So when we look at these blood types, we have AB, and O, and you can see the genotypes presented, and then we can see where they can receive blood from. Now, sex-linked traits in humans. Now, we've talked about sex-linked traits before, but most are carried on the X chromosome. So in this instance, a female may not present with any symptoms, but a male would, because there is no allele on the Y to mask the X allele. So if this trait is such as like color blindness, a woman could be a carrier, but a man would actually be colorblind. So hemophilia also is one of these traits, and is an X-linked dominant trait, and Y-linked traits are very, very rare. So that red-green color blindness is very common in men. In women would not have red-green color blindness. They would actually be completely colorblind because they need 2 alleles to be colorblind. Now, in hemophilia, in actually hemophilia A to be specific, it is a sex-linked X disorder, and it causes blood clotting issues. Actually, the inability to clot. It affects about 1 in every 10,000 males, but only 1 in 100 million females. Now, hemophilia A can be treated without blood transfusions and with clotting factor 9 as well, but it can be a very problem. Now, we also know that the Tsars of Russia, this was part of their problem. So let's look at some polygenic inheritance in humans. We know that we've talked about skin color and eye color, and actually my daughter has multiple eye colors. My youngest one, she's going to come up with blue sometimes. Sometimes her eyes actually turn yellow, and sometimes her eyes are brown. I'm a very medium-skinned person, while my daughter is very light-skinned. And so you can come up with different shades depending on how your genetics is going to mix, and those multiple alleles and multiple genes holding that. So what if we have changes in chromosomal number? And we know this can occur when we're separating chromosomes in DNA replication and in cell replication. Now, one of these is called trisomy 21, or Down syndrome. It means that we have 3 autosomal cells on the 21st gene. Now, this relates in a very specific type of a presentation. Usually there is some mental lapses or mental delays, and we have a very specific type of shape of head. And then there's Turner syndrome, where we actually have 3 X cells on our 23rd chromosome. Now, this is going to cause that very interesting neck in the back. And these females, although presenting all signs and symptoms of being female, cannot have children. Okay, that's the end of our chapter. I hope you have a great day. Bring any questions you have to class, and we'll talk to you later.